Okay, so this is a quick video about Vagrant and Packer and setting the standards for repeatable builds and boxes to be used at MIE. Vagrant is a automation tool that allows you to build very simple scripted builds of different environments that gives you consistency in testing and deployment. And it supports both Mac, Linux and Windows. In order to do this, what Vagrant does is it takes snapshots of those operating systems. They're called boxes and puts them on the shelf. That then can be downloaded and be used over and over again. So you're starting from a known initial set of conditions, a box with pre-installed software, and then you're writing scripts to install what other services you want on that box that then can be blown away and be rebuilt from code, from scripts in a repeatable fashion. So in order to prepare boxes for different environments, there's a tool called Packer that HashiCorp developed that essentially runs through different hosting infrastructure, for example, VMware or VirtualBox, and installs the base operating system, essentially puts the ISO into that environment, runs the install process, sets up the virtual machine with the amount of memory and CPUs and all that other fun stuff, and then packages that up in a zip file. It's called a box, and then it puts it on the shelf so it could be reloaded later and used by calling Vagrant. So then Vagrant uses the existing boxes that you've been built. Now, one question is, why wouldn't we use existing ones that are out there? For example, in the public domain, there's something called Bento Boxes with a whole bunch of different distributions already pre-developed that you can just download the box from the internet. Or there's another one called Boxcutter that has Windows builds, for example, that are pre-developed. And you can download those boxes. Well, the simple answer is provenance. We need to know that these boxes haven't been tampered with. We should be building them ourselves. It also gives the ability for us to tweak them and install whatever any standard consistent feature sets that we want on top of the box, and it gives us control. So what I've done is develop a project under DevOps here walled MIE Packer. And in this project here, basically, it exists solely to build boxes that we will then put into our repository, and then can be used in Vagrant scripts to stand those boxes up. So to get started, though, you have to have Vagrant installed and Packer installed on your machine. Ideally, you'd have get LFS large file support so that because we're dealing with artifacts that are quite large, and you don't want to have to store all that in the Git repo. So by using Git LFS, it allows it to be stored in a separate artifact repository, and Git then points to it. And then essentially you either clone this through HTTPS or SSH. And because the way this thing works, it uses Git submodules. As you can see here, it's actually using Bento Box with a particular hash. It's tied to the master branch. But as say CentOS 6 or CentOS 7 get updated, for example, we started originally with CentOS 6.2, and I believe we're up to like 6.8 now. It becomes a hassle to have to keep updating these. So instead, our repo just relies on the Bento repo and runs its own build commands. So essentially, when you clone this environment, it just goes to the CentOS and then it builds the virtual boxes for CentOS 6, 6.7 and 6.10. And then we check it in as our version of CentOS 7 and CentOS 6 because we don't really care about the hot fixes and the minor releases that come out within those operating systems. We just want one consistent CentOS 7 build and one consistent CentOS 6 build. And of course, the same thing here with Boxcutter. Windows has about as small as you can make it, version of VirtualBox that you can run a local Windows eval version for Windows 10 that we will use as a basis for any time we're doing regression testing or testing of ActiveX controls or things of that nature. So that's a quick overview on Packer, particularly MIE Packer. What I'm gonna do here is quickly demo how this functions and how it works. So essentially what I've done here is I've got VirtualBox kind of running here. We don't really need it. I only have it open just so you can see it sort of functioning. And then I have a shell prompt over here and I'm in a test folder. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clone this by basically running this command here. I'm gonna clone recursively here these submodules. The recurse submodules necessary, so it goes and gets all the other repos that are in there, and the 8 just runs 8 processes. That J8 isn't really necessary, but that just runs 8 different processes to do it quickly. So you just clone it. This downloads the code from the server, and it puts that into the Bento and the Boxcutter here, and then we CD to the Packer build. And as you can see here, the Bento, the Boxcutter, and the build scripts are there with the README. And then what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and run it with the build. Okay, now that we have the Packer boxes built for both Windows and CentOS 6 and CentOS 7, it allows us to go over to Vagrant and use the Vagrant templates for building boxes. So, for example, if I go to a CentOS 6 example, all it takes to develop a CentOS 6 box is the definition of a Vagrant file, which has basics in it like where's the box defined. So here's where the box would be, and downloading it. And how much, what kind of network do you want, and how much memory you need, and things of that nature. Basic physical infrastructure for the box, emulating that. And then you have a provisioning script. And MIE has already developed like a base system config, things that we want to install on every single Linux machine, how to set up authorization, which sets up the LDAP service, single sign-on, and YubiKey capability. And then whether or not you can see different things are commented out here for Git, MySQL, whether you want MySQL or you want MySQL 5.5, whether you want to have Salt installed or Cobbler and so forth. And under the provisioning folder within this project, there are a bunch of scripts for installing other services. So under provisioning here, for example, if you need Nagios, there's Nagios scripts here for setting up Nagios, or for Salt, for example, scripts that you just call from the provisioning script that are common to all boxes. In addition to the examples, there are some miscellaneous examples here for setting up a fax server, or for setting up a Pixie server, or for setting up Security Onion, where you can just go, for example, if I want to set up a fax server, there's a provisioning script here that runs the base provisioning, but then installs the drivers for the Diva cards that we use for faxing. Or for example, if we go to Cobbler, you'll see several scripts here, but essentially this, after doing provisioning here and finishing this, we run Cobbler, which installs the Cobbler program. And you can see there's quite a few steps to go through here to install Cobbler, but the advantage is that it's done repeatedly, consistently, and you get a standard Cobbler server without having to touch anything, without having to do any manual steps when you're done. So that's the power of Vagrant and the power of Packer.